Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our coverage of Survivor 50 here on RHAP. My name is Mike Bloom, and I'm bringing you another podcast telling you what you need to know about the cast of Survivor 50. And we are just starting on this proverbial Oregon Trail like journey through getting to know this cast. And so I can think of no better person to highlight than someone who once compared Survivor to the Oregon Trail. We are talking about Aubry Bracco and her, I would say, quite surprising return to the island, her fourth time on Survivor 50. Now, of course, I am not alone here. I am joined by someone who can't tell me if the legality of a crossed out vote stands in a court of law. It is Ali Lasher.
Yeah, I'm trying to make a connection. Like, did Joe get dysentery? Like, can we continue the metaphor? Mike, I'm so happy to be here chatting with you about Aubry in particular, but about anything. Always good to see you.
Likewise. Always enjoyed the chance to chat, especially about somebody like Aubry, because is it weird to say like Aubry is of her time? Because yes, you feel like it was a hop, skip, and a jump that she really hit her, 3-season streak on Survivor, 32, 34, 38. But we are actually right now encroaching upon the 10-year anniversary of her reality TV debut in Survivor Co. Wrong. And we'll get into this. I think certainly it's been a bit of diminishing returns for Aubry since that powerhouse first season, but that kind of slapped me in the face when I realized how much time has passed.
No, it's extremely dark, like extremely dark. When people are, in the Challenge 50 challenge, oh my God, wow, in the Survivor 50 cast, talking about like, wow, it's been so long since Aubry played. I'm like, really? Because I feel like she played 3 seasons ago. And then in doing the research for this, I cannot believe how long ago it was since we saw Aubry.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I will, again, go back to what I said here before. Look, there was certainly a lot of discourse about how surprised people were by some of the casting choices on 50. I'll be cards up. Aubry was the most surprising casting choice from my perspective, because we'll get into her story. But the last time we saw her, again, she played in 2016, immediately went back basically for 2017 for a returning player season, and then was one of 4 returnees in Edge of Extinction in 2019. And it was not a great run for her, especially that third time around. She gets voted out in the pre-merge with an idol in her pocket. I would say she is part of a jury that, ends up crowning one of the most controversial winners in Survivor history. And so by and large, Aubry kind of dropped off of the Survivor fandom radar. Obviously she has a lot of great stuff going on with her life. She is relatively like online, but has not really talked about the show since then. So I think I was sort of mistakenly under the impression of like she was kind of done with Survivor. And listening even to Talking with T-Bird last summer, she kind of
I'm so glad you brought that up. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Please, no.
No, go ahead.
Well, yeah, because, listen, I did the whole wish list series last summer, or 2 summers ago at this point, and I had said, like, as so much with Aubry, it seemed like she did not necessarily want to go back to play Survivor anytime soon. And she said literally that on Talking with T-Bird, but then on air is like, maybe. And that might have been, honestly, this podcast network might have been the nudge to get her back on that island for a 4th time.
Okay, it's so funny because I went back and listened to Talking with T-Bird, and honestly, like, you already got your download of this pod. Well, no, finish the YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. But if you're gonna do one thing to listen to, like, what's Aubry's current mindset, go listen to the July 7th, 2024 Talking with T-Bird, because there is so much to mine from the podcast, or just, I guess, listen here because I'm gonna mine it here. But what struck me the most is how convinced Rob is that Aubry will never play again. Because again, Aubry doesn't want to, not because he thinks like Aubry wouldn't be good, whatever. But he even asked her, like, what advice do you have for people who are in the mix for season 50? Like, Rob is asking questions like he's talking to someone who is
I also wonder if
retired.
He was in the mix for 50 at that point. Was he trying to like mine his own information out of her?
Well, so I even looked of like, okay, this would have been recorded around the time where there was still that like 200 person list being culled down to 50, whatever. So like, I have to believe she was 100% already called, already thinking this over when she's on this podcast. I don't know for sure. I'm just saying that because I feel like that's the least no-ish kind of no I've ever heard. She doesn't actually say no. T-Bird's out here being like, Aubry's a competitor. If she gets the call, she'll go. And Aubry's sort of like, my life is fine, but never say never. And I was like, oh, she knew. There
And
she was.
Bieber, she has made a comeback here. Well, let's get into the story of Aubry Bracco, Ali, because again, I think if people remember her largely by especially her latter 2 seasons, it's a little bit of like, okay, why do we need her, honestly, for time number 4? But I think it speaks to the absolute killing she made in Survivor Ko-Rong a decade ago.
Well, that's my biggest question. I went over the tapes, right? I watched Survivor Ko-Rong, I watched Game Changer, and I watched half of Edge of Extinction in the last 2 weeks preparing for this podcast.
Oh my God.
I listened to this podcast. I listened to a fabulous podcast with Kelly Wentworth and Brandon from the summer when they were talking about the Survivor 50 cast. And then again, this network has done everything. I was going to go back and listen to some of Aubry's exit interviews. Rob's already pulled it together, and you can like listen to a clip that's been re-released. Anyway, I studied the game tape, and my biggest question that I don't necessarily have an answer to yet, but I want to talk to you about is like, what will the castaways' perceptions be when Aubry steps onto the beach? Is it the incredible game-winning worthy performance in Ko-Rong? And I want to ask her, that's not to say Michelle shouldn't have won, but it's more
right,
like
that's a challenge competitor. You would never besmirch her.
No, and I think it's more like to equate it to Drag Race back in our day, Mike, to throw back to that. I think it's more like there are people who show up, queens who show up with like a winning package, right? They've like put the looks in, they're practiced, they're ready, they've practiced Snatch Game, and like if you looked at it on paper, they've put in a performance that they could win a season of Drag Race. Do they always win their season? No. So I think Aubry put in a game-winning package on her season. She didn't win. So like, is that the Aubry aura she's coming in with? Or has she successfully reduced her threat level from basically having no showing, even though she made it almost all the way in Game Changers, and then, being the first returning player eliminated in Edge of Extinction, and then taking, 10 years off?
Yeah. So, I mean, as we start to, I think, get into that legacy, it's an incredibly good question because this first season, I will say, like, is a powerhouse season, which is wild because Aubry starts off having essentially an anxiety attack at her camp on day 2, gets really emotionally, mentally, environmentally, just everything goes awry for her. But she's able to get her feet under her to become a true strategist in this game. One who, listen, she's making decisions. Sometimes the decisions have a little bit of fallback to them. For example, a moment I referenced in the opening where she is going so much back and forth between 2 options that in the voting booth, she writes down one person's name, crosses it out, and like she's freaking Logan Roy, and then writes down the other person's name. But obviously she can't get another piece of paper, so that is also prominently on display to show how indecisive she was in that moment. That being said, the second half of the game, she loses her closest ally right at the merge. She's got this big old nasty pussy sore on his back, and so he has to be medevaced. He leaves with an idol in his pocket, which was going to be used to protect her at that vote. But then she's able to find safe haven with a new group of predominantly women and her closest ally, Joe. They are able to make a good cut into the game. Aubry, in particular, as we'll get into it in a little bit, is able to make some really choice moves from a one-on-one perspective. She's able to pretty much dictate how the entirety of the post-merge is going to go. And that could obviously work for you to get you all the way to the final 3. It can also work against you, as there were some people who were quite emotional and angry about Aubry specifically betraying them. And they called her out about it, and they did not vote for her. And as a result, she lost in what was, in the past decade, one of the most controversial endings in the show's history. Now, it's wild in the wake of like Heroes, Healers, Hustlers and Edge of Extinction and 46 to hear that. But like, this was 2016. Like, this was when kind of the Survivor internet was still in a bit of a nascent status. This was like the first prominent Stan Wars I really experienced, where like you were either Team Michelle, social game wins overall, or you were like Team Aubry, most robbed finalist of all time. It's then going to lead to her getting brought back immediately for the next returning season, where she is on paper one of the biggest threats. She's akin to like a Rob Cesternino, right? She didn't win, but people thought she should have won. And she really lays low. And it's a very different status for her, where as opposed to calling basically all the shots in Ko Wrong, she calls so few shots in Game Changer. She is left out of the Malcolm vote. She's left out of the JT vote. Then she's in for a little while. Then she's left out of the Andrea vote. She ends up, I guess, being left out of Advantage Getting because kind of everyone was due to the flagrant advantage plays. But she makes it all the way to 5th place. Edge of Extinction comes back, 1 of 4 returnees, has her back against the wall, and decides to start a dialogue with many, many different people. This is definitely the most egg Aubry has on her face amongst her 3 seasons, and she loves an egg. But basically, the newbies kind of make her feel comfortable. She swapped onto a tribe that is 4 people from her original tribe and 1 person from the other tribe, so she thinks easy pickings. But the newbies could not wait to finally cut the throat of any veteran that they could. And so Aubry ends up getting voted out in episode 5 with an idol in her pocket.
So I shouldn't have watched the season, so I should have just listened to that. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I think what you've laid out there is what has sort of emerged to me as sort of bookends of Aubry, where I think one of her big mistakes in Ko Wrong, and for anyone looking to rewatch, I recommend it because I really do think the Michelle Aubry of it all really hits differently on the rewatch.
Oh yeah, I mean, this Ko Wrong is one of my favorite Survivor seasons, period. Very underrated.
It's a great season. Honestly, I think there's a case we made that Ty could have won that season. Like I think all 3 of them, had their pluses and minuses and put in really good performances. But I think Aubry's critical mistake in Ko Wrong is that she overestimates her jury, her peers, right? Like Scott in that season is pouring water on the fire, is basically taking his ball and going home because the vote's not going his way.
Fitting for a basketball player.
Yeah. And Aubry is like, Scott is a competitor. He's a professional athlete. He certainly isn't doing this emotionally. He must be trying to redirect the vote. He must be, gaming this and trying to get the votes on him to play an idol, whatever. It's like, actually, no, like Jason and Scott are just bitter people in that season. And you're probably overthinking and overestimating them and therefore not doing great jury management. And then on the flip side, all the way in Edge of Extinction, again, the edit is the edit, and when you're there, it's different. But like from what we see in the edit, she is the sole returnee on the swap tribe that's going to tribal council, and she's just like taking for granted that they're not going to make a move on her, and like thinks they're almost like too dumb to make a move on her, and completely underestimates them. So I'm almost hoping both of these experiences kind of like shake out in the wash, and this could be her like Goldilocks season of having, overthinking less and underthinking less, and meeting it right in the middle and getting the right reads on everyone.
I think that's a really good point. And I would say if I could like target the biggest weakness of Aubry in general is that, and this is a very weird thing, it's like saying my greatest weakness is I care too much. Her weakness, I think, is that she's too logical. Like Aubry is a very strategic thinker. She's an incredibly creative individual because I actually think she's very underrated as a confessionalist. Like she has this incredible metaphors and I'm actually very excited to see her 4th time out. But going back to that moment with Scott, I mean, arguably one of her biggest mistakes in Ko Wrong is that she has this person, Debbie, she's kind of been working with since the very beginning. And Debbie is admittedly an emotional player. And she is someone who reacts very vehemently to Scott and Jason pouring the water onto the fire. And Aubry's like, Debbie's set on a bad path. She wants to go down this despite the fact that there's a better thing to pursue. Basically, there was this other person in her alliance, Julia, who Aubry clocked was kind of playing both sides. She wanted to take her out sooner rather than later. And so she's like, Debbie can't be trusted. We have to get rid of her. And so she then turns the entire alliance onto Debbie in that moment. I don't know if Aubry necessarily likes working with emotional players. A little ironic considering that emotions are a heavy part of Aubry's arc through her 3 seasons. But I do think that sometimes her not being able to think about maybe the feelings of the competition and how they're sort of playing with their emotions makes her kind of remove her own emotions from the decision, if that makes sense, and say, okay, this is the more clinical, tactical thing to do, even if it doesn't necessarily vibe the most with how the person's going to feel.
Yeah, I think here's a quote from Aubry in Edge of Extinction, quote, "I hate Kumbaya Survivor." It's definitely not in the feelings place, but to your point, she also like gets on Peter and Debbie for being sort of like ego driven, like erratic, less logical, more emotional people. The thing though, to spin it, not that I'm here to advocate for Aubry, I'm just here to talk about
Bennett.
Aubry. Is I do think I actually like that move when she goes on Debbie, because it's really just like, okay, if you can't be trusted and I have the right read on Julia, which Aubry did, and you're going to go talk to Julia about what we've talked about, you've got to go, you know? So like, I think in a 26, one thing I'm worried about for everyone is like, how do we have 24 people in a 26-day game? Aubry is someone who, you know, has never played a 26-day season, right? EOE
Yep.
was 39 days. So, and she has benefited from fostering really close sort of pair duo allies in particularly Korong. How is she going to handle the accelerated pace? And I think that Debbie switch up is a good indication that she's able to stay, one of several examples where she's able to stay flexible and
Mm.
adapt and switch and have better, you know, good enough relationships with Sarah, Cerise, Sydney, Julia, where she can kind of go back and forth and work with, you know, who she needs to work with at sort of a moment's notice, and not necessarily just be locked in with the ally she started the game with.
Yeah, I think that flexibility is her greatest strength. I totally agree. And nowhere is it more prominently on display than arguably like her crowning achievement, which is this Scott Pollard vote. So for the uninitiated, basically in Korong, everyone had, there were regular immunity idols, but the concept, correct me if I'm wrong, Ali, was like they could also be combined Wonder Twin style to become a super idol, which can be used to negate the votes after the fact. So essentially, it's like a secret immunity necklace. And the other alliance, which was Scott and Kyle, Jason, and Ty, had two halves of a super idol. They could ostensibly play it. And Aubry Bracco is able to work her magic to go to Ty, essentially, and convince him to not give the half of the idol to one of his allies, to essentially sell him down the river. And she did it. And she convinced him to do so. And like that was probably the height of her power in the game. It was incredibly impressive.
100%. It was her best move of the season. I think I do wonder how much her relationships with a Joe Del Campo, who for the uninitiated was her other like primary ally, lock steady, like, you know, guy in the game who got medevaced for meat. But like Ty is
Medevac for me
somebody.
sounds like the name of like an illicit video that gives you a million viruses.
New band name, I call it. But Ty is somebody who I think even in Game Changers is like looking for somebody to support him, a confidant, someone he can trust to give him advice and like hope that it's the right advice, right? Like Scott and Jason are giving him bad advice and he joins in on things that are outside of his character. Here, Aubry's giving him what I think is good advice to sort of betray Scott potentially, and he listens and he takes that information. I don't know how much that will translate to a season of the top of the top, you know, the cream of the crop of Survivor players, but you know, it's a really, really excellent move in Aubry's artillery, and she explains it very well in Final Tribal. So should she make it to Final Tribal, I know she didn't have the greatest performance because she didn't win, but I do think she's able to sort of pull out what her good moves are and explain them to people. As she's as good as explaining the move as she is in the moment, meeting her allies where they are. And you know, Ty's biggest issue was he was not having agency with Scott and Jason. So she can see that and appeal to him and not just boss him around and tell him what to do. So again, like hopefully that style can translate with sort of more experienced players than, you know, Ty in his first season. But it was really an incredible, incredible move.
It's a good point as to the fact that there are a number of people who have been to a final tribal council in their previous season, and Aubry is among the couple that I think on the season are considered quote unquote robbed, or at least like maybe the favorite coming in from an edit perspective, a fan perspective, who end up losing it ultimately. I mean, again, this was going on a decade ago at this point. But do you think if Aubry were to ever make her way to the end again, she would have a fundamentally different approach to a final tribal council given what happened previously?
I think the change comes more in her gameplay throughout. Like she said in her exit interview in Game Changers that she was like way more focused on her jury management and wasn't taking for granted necessarily that people are going to vote for like respect the move of like backstabbing you and whatever. But what's interesting is then the winner of Game Changers is somebody where the jury awarded a person who stabbed them all in the back, smiled to their face, and played like a criminal, and Sarah Lacina. And so I guess the answer is like, I don't know what Aubry takes away from Korong and Game Changers back to back, because like, what should someone take away? Is it that you should play your final tribal differently, maybe do more appealing to the egos of your jurors, like Sarah Lacina really does expertly in Game Changers, and saying like, I had to get you all out because you were going to beat me, you are all incredible. But at the same time, I hope Sarah Lacina's win in an all returning players season gives Aubry permission to kind of go back to her Korong instincts and roots and really play an aggressive game, and know that this season of Survivor 50 will award strategic output. And that's not to say Michelle wasn't strategic, but I'm just saying, like, if she was worried about that, she should not be worried going into Survivor 50.
All right, let's get some hard and fast facts about Aubry Bracco. So Aubry is an even 40 years old. She has been on the seasons, as we mentioned, Korong, Game Changers, Edge of Extinction. And again, we talk about these diminishing returns. Second place in Korong, fifth place in Game Changers, 16th, technically speaking, in Edge of Extinction, because Chris Underwood and Rick Devens both return to the game. Technically has made 3 finales. She's 3 for 3 because of the concept of Edge of Extinction. She has played 111 days, including 22 days on the Edge of Extinction. Has won 15 challenges in the pre-merge, 5 challenges in the post-merge. I think she's only won 1 individual immunity challenge, if I'm recalling correctly, but it's still like pretty good at endurance. 21 votes against. I had forgotten, Ali, until I rewatched some clips from Korong. Aubry gets votes at so many tribal councils.
Yeah, and I think I read a fact that was like every time she got 1 vote, she gets 2, which is like maybe meaningless, but it's not just the person leaving through a vote at the majority, right? It's like there was an active plan with at least more than one person involved to target her. Yeah, she's really like always on the table in both seasons. So it is interesting. The one thing that jumped out at me of many in your fast fact slide is her age, and really like how much has changed for Aubry. I mean, a lot of people, things have changed, but just to focus on Aubry, right? She's 29 when she starts her first season, 30, 32, like carry the one, whatever, a couple years older in the next season, and then a couple years older in the season after that. Since being on the show last, she was sort of like in social media, changing careers. Now she's got a baby. She's more settled in her life.
Yeah, she's got a business.
Yeah, I do wonder. I'm really excited to see Aubry 2.0, because the things in your life, what's great about Survivor is you bring in your worldview, you bring in your life experience, and she is a fundamentally different person, just factually, than she was when she first played in Korong. So I'm really excited to see that evolution of Aubry.
I totally agree. Well, let's see who Aubry might welcome into her world here. Let's look at the cast at 50. Now, let's start with the connections that Aubry already has. We have seen these on screen. And I guess I'll start with the ones that she probably has the weakest connections with to the strongest, just based on the amount of time she spent with them. Start with Ozzy here, because even though both made the merge, I think just given how the tribes were split up in the pre-merge, Aubry barely played with Ozzy. I think they were together for like 1 vote, then Ozzy's voted out. Aubry's voted out 2 days before the game ends. I mean, I don't know if anything came out through your Game Changers rewatch. Do you have any sense of how the two of them might interact?
Yeah, the best I can say is she didn't vote Ozzy. She was like on the wrong side of the vote when he got eliminated. And I think really the story of Game Changers for Aubry is she keeps trying to work with strength. Like Tony approaches her in the beginning, she agrees, she wants to work with big targets. She herself is a big target. She wants to work with, Tony, he's eliminated. Wants to work with Malcolm, he's eliminated. So potentially she was sort of on a good page with Ozzy in that same category. But I think it's sort of immaterial based on probably how much time has elapsed. Ozzy has kind of reintegrated into the modern Survivor event circuit and the Bryson Wen stuff. Aubry's really been out of that world, so I don't know that like she's top on his list of people to work with.
All right, well, in the middle of this trio of previous connections, I would say is Rick Devens. Now, Aubry and Rick technically never played together, but they did spend time on the edge of extinction together in the pre-merge before Rick left. And clearly, of all of these shenanigans he was pulling off at tribal councils, arguably one of the most visibly entertained people was Aubry. I don't know if Aubry has talked about it in her exit press, Ali, but like I would imagine if Rick had made it to the end, she maybe would have voted for him. I don't know if she was part of the contingency that told Chris Underwood, like, hey, if you want to win the game, you have to put yourself into Fire Mickey and take out Rick Devens. But what do you think about the two of them actually now being able to play a game together instead of, living life on the edge?
So it's another one where sort of, I guess like the thesis of this whole podcast to me, or really when thinking about Aubry, is just like, what is the reaction? Is the reaction going to be both of the tribes and of Aubry herself? Does she view herself as like the big threat she viewed herself coming into Game Changers as? Or does she view herself as more of an under the radar, disconnected person who can kind of lay low? I think that will change how she views both Rick and Ozzy, who I think are probably higher on the like visible threat list coming into this. Rick obviously having been a co-host of the On Fire podcast and former employee of the month at the Exile Shack for coins or whatever, Fire Token Shack. The thing is, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, her talking with T-Bird episode, T-Bird, one of my favorite people just like on this planet, contacted Rick Devens to record like a voice memo for Aubry. And Aubry listens to it. And Devens is like, doing his like, I'm a newscaster, Devens thing. And like, we didn't really play together, but one of my best memories of Aubry. And he says something like how she helped them in the 2 days he was on exile with her, whatever. Aubry has like almost no reach. She's like, oh, that's nice. Like, whatever. And then what makes this worth mentioning is Robert T-Bird later asked her, like, who are 4 people you'd like 4 or 5 people you'd like love to play again with, or, love to be around. And she mentions, I have this somewhere. This is all from memory now because it was the funniest thing that ever happened. She mentions Kelly.
Like Wentworth Kelly?
Yes, Kelly Wentworth, who she's like, very close with. She mentions, she says Malcolm, Suri, Kelly. Then she really thinks, and again, they've just played an audio of Devin. She's really thinking. And she's like, I don't know, like Ty. And then she declines to mention a 5th person. And this is after they all discuss that Devens is a lock to come back on 50. So that could all be like, God forbid somebody listen to one of my podcasts and is like, she clearly hates this person. I don't think she hates Sevens at all. I think she kind of like feels like you set it up. They didn't play together. Like, I think they just like, she doesn't know him kind of thing. I am so curious to see how they interact on the show. Cause I would say, had I not listened to that, had I not seen any Survivor, if you just told me Devens and Aubry were going to interact on Survivor, I'd say that seems like a match to me, depending on how showboaty Rick is being, like they seem like they could hit each other at a rational, cerebral, strategic level. After this podcast, I was like, I don't know. I don't feel like they've done any pre-gaming as of July 2024.
Well, you mentioned Suri, and she did as well on that list. And yes, this is far and away not only the strongest connection she has of the 3. I dare say the minute she is on the same beach as her, she's going to lock back in with her. Now, Suri did leave her out of the vote a couple times, but basically so did everybody in Game Changers. And Aubry, I think, literally has a confessional in Game Changers where she's like, Suri is just such a good person. Like, it's tough to find those out there in the world, let alone in Survivor. And so I cannot imagine the stars have fallen from her eyes all these years later.
No, she is such an active fan of Suri. She watched Suri on Big Brother. She like mentions that on the Talking with T-Bird podcast. She also mentioned in like a throwaway comment, like, oh, even though she put my name down, I don't care. And I even like went back because I was like, when did Suri put Aubry's name down?
And was it during that chaotic Michaela vote steal vote?
Exactly. So basically, for people who didn't watch the season, 'cause it doesn't matter, but like it is Suri is like crossing Sarah by using an advantage that Sarah gave her just for safekeeping and trust. Turns out that due to the fine print, she cannot actually use it. It's non-transferable. But Suri was using it to save Aubry. Her intended use was to save Aubry, expose Ty as like a liar, and save Sarah and Aubry in the process. Then in the hubbub of not being able to use it, she ends up like scrawling Aubry's name down because that's where she thinks Sarah and Ty are going to go. Turns out Michaela goes home in that vote, but like I'm surprised Aubry even mentioned it. Like it was on her mind all those years later because it really was an extraordinary effort by Suri to save Aubry and risk her whole game in the process.
Yeah, so I think that they are definitely going to be thick as thieves. Now, while I say she really has no other connections, there is a bit of an odd one when it comes to the new era. Let's talk about Q. Because at the merge of Survivor 46, Q is meeting a young woman named Mariah. And I guess one of the first conversations they have on the beach is, who's your favorite player? And Mariah says, Aubry. And Q responds by saying, okay, you're gone. Because he feels that in just merely talking about the fact that you enjoy watching Aubry, this shows that you are a dangerous threat who must be taken out at all costs. I mean, this has to come up on the season, no?
Yeah, I think it came up on the Talking with T-Bird podcast. She's aware of it going into this. Like, how could she not be? Like, you get added on CBS's Survivor. Like, even if you're not up to date, you hear about it. Yeah, I hope that either Q's reputation precedes him and like he's gone before they link up, or like he's like the first one out if they're on the same tribe, whatever. Or he has such a reverence for her that they are bonded. And again, like Aubry was able to effectively work with some, more different personalities, like in Debbie. So maybe she could really work with Q. I really hope Q doesn't show up and like when people are all in anyone but me mode, he's able to kind of just be like, Aubry's a huge threat, and she goes out for that. Because like I'll be so disappointed. I really want to see Aubry play.
Any possible other friends or foes you're thinking about for Aubry from all the people she has yet to interact with?
Well, here's what I like for her, however this all shakes out, is like she doesn't have an obvious pairing. And even if people are like really deep into Survivor, which I question like how much Survivor any number of these people have seen like during the Aubry years, but like even if like she's linked to Suri is such a big threat on her own. Like I don't think they're viewed as like a strong pair because they weren't each other's strongest duo in Game Changers.
Right.
Whereas someone like, Mike and Angelina and Christian, like there's some more obvious connections, obviously Camilla and Kyle, like the two people coming from 49 who no one knows, like Savannah and Rizzo. So I like that no matter how the tribes shake out, nobody's like, oh, Aubry has a really close ally in another tribe, so we have to take her out here. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I really see her. Like, I think Aubry's strength is she can really connect with anybody.
Yeah.
I think she might have a hard time with someone like a Jonathan, or depending on how like Q or Devins are, like maybe there's some like Peter-esque energy going on. But a lot of these like really good Survivor players are really good Survivor players because they're fans of the show. And Aubry at the end of the day is just a huge fan who went on to play the game 4 times. So I love this draw for her. Here's my question. What do you think people will view her challenge prowess at? Because that's another thing. If it's 3 tribes and people are focused on tribe strength in the early days, like not that happened on Game Changers, but
right.
Could she be somebody they reach for first and say, sorry to Aubry, you gotta go.
I mean, it certainly is a possibility. I don't think she was really like a major slouch in any of the pre-merge
No.
challenges she participated in, so it's not as much of like a glaring weakness as maybe it might be for someone like Sari who has had that in the past. But I don't know. I feel like that could more so be used as like a cover for, okay, you're really disconnected from us all. And so if she ends up with you talk about being a good draw, if she ends up with a bad draw in a tribe of a bunch of people she's not really connected to, that might be a better reason of like, we're voting on strength when in actuality, like we have no connection with Aubry. So she's the easiest one to cut.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think like in terms of her strongest allies and like Neil or really Joe is like what so she's really known for connecting with Joe Del Campo, who's like a 72-year-old man at the time. Like, could she link up with Colby? Could she
Yeah.
link up with Coach? Like, could she be the Sophie to Coach's coach? I guess you can't make an analogy when one person is just the person. Um, I think she has a really good chance of like taking a shot with some of these like more old school players and like walking them through being able to adapt them to a more new school game.
All right, Ali, I have one final question for you. It's a big one. Why will Aubry Bracco finally be able to win Survivor 50?
Yeah, I just think she has had such valuable experience, right? She didn't like with no disrespect to Kyle, my Michigan law alum, respect, but like she didn't. I think it's almost harder to win and come back, right? Like D and Kyle. She had things go about as well as it could go and maneuvered to a winning game, but then didn't win. And then she had things go like challenge after challenge after challenge, and you get eliminated in a heartbreaker position of like fifth out. And then she had to go about as worse it could possibly go. So she's almost lived every iteration of Survivor you can live. And I do think she's somebody who ruminates and reflects and thinks about things. That coupled with her life experience changes, I just think like it's such a good position for her to come back in and yeah, I don't like she wasn't my winner pick. Like I didn't pick her because she's like a winner pick. I don't really participate in the winner pick of it all. But after, reviewing the materials, I really think she could win. Like I think she's in such a good spot between old and new school. My only fear is that they come in and first impressions are hard to break. She's got the glasses. You remember her. She's smart. She almost won. She should have won. Get her out. Like that is one of my fears if she hasn't shaken off sort of that level of respect from Ko-Rong.
Well, this was a podcast as delicious as coleslaw. Ali, thank you so much for all the work you did before this. I think it was really valuable insights that you provided from both that material as well as your own fantastic brain. I'd be remiss, I love to hear plug from you as well, but I also want to hear your thoughts on recent challenge veteran D on this season. Any spare thoughts on how you think D will do? And then whatever you want to plug for the listeners out there.
That's interesting. I think D's threat level has to be higher than Aubry's, right? Not to bring everything back to Aubry, but I just do think like seeing what D was able to do. Again, I really do wonder how much Survivor these older school people have watched. Like maybe some people don't know who D is, just like, oh, she won, and they won't be intimidated by her because she's like a smaller woman, and of course, like older school men won't be intimidated by her. But like, if you've seen D's season, it's going to be tough for D because like. She's so charismatic. She's so charming and smart. But, like, you can't believe what she says. Like, look at what happened with Austin. She's just such a good game player that you can't get misted by her, right, to borrow from Big Brother. So I'm really excited to see Dee back on Survivor. She was great on the challenge. She's a lot of fun to see her there, too, in sort of a more, cash context, like back at doing the challenge stuff. So very excited. Here's another thing I want to say, just a plug for Survivor in general. I will be brave, and it's not because the show wasn't good. I think Survivor episodes have just gotten too long for me at my old age. I had to binge watch the end of 49, like the back half, because I didn't want to like give up on watching it, but it was just, I don't know, it was a little drag for me. Going back and watching some old seasons and like getting excited to talk to you about it has really like reinvigorated my love of the show. Like it's not that I fell out of love with the show, but I was dragging a bit. And just like some of these seasons, just they hold up. Like I watch like, seeing some old favorites like Zeke and all of these people on the show that I like watched 10 years ago, apparently, and loved. I just got so excited again. I'm so excited for 50. I like really, really can't wait. So yeah, I'm just really excited. And a lot of that is obviously the great pre-work you and Rob and Brandon and everyone have been doing for the last year to get everyone excited. I know I'm like showing up at the last minute. I'm like, guys, I'm like kind of excited, but I'm just like falling in love with Survivor all over again. So this has been a ton of fun. I hope everybody, is feeling the love too.
I hope so as well. Well, the love's going to keep on coming because next up will be someone very similar to Aubry, a self-proclaimed nerd from Massachusetts who finished in a rather controversial runner-up position. It will be Charlie Davis from Survivor 46, perhaps a kindred spirit in Aubry. We shall see. In the meantime, let us know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think about Aubry 4.0, considering how long it's been since she's last played? Do you think, to Ali's question, she will be considered one of the big threats from her co-wrong perspective, or will she come in a bit more of a lamb from her Edge of Extinction perspective? Let us know your thoughts, but suffice it to say, I cannot wait to see what she is going to bring back onto our screens on February 25th and hopefully beyond. Thank you all so much, as usual, for listening. Ali, thank you so much for your fantastic insights. Until next time, everybody, take care. Bye-bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.